pleased to welcome everyone to this meeting, the Winchester Town Forum, taking place from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. Time is 6:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Mike Crass, Chairperson of this meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you're joining us online, please turn on your camera and microphone off until your item. Can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome the members of the public to this meeting? We'll invite you forward when it is your time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda. Claire, is this speaker okay? I feel like I'm getting
on the right hand side. That's fine.
Okay, I feel like I'm getting a bit of echo. Item number 1, apologies. Any apologies, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillors Green and Scott. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And item number 2 is disclosures of interest. Disclosure of interest, please, anyone?
Yeah, I probably need to disclose an interest, personal non-pecuniary interest as a member of the County Council.
Councillor Todd. And item 3, Chairperson announcements. I can't think of anything to specifically announce this evening. There will be things I'll talk about throughout which are quite relevant to individual items. But otherwise, we'll move swiftly on to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting held on 26th of January 2023, pages 5 to 10. Please could I have members' confirmation that the minutes can be signed as a correct record? All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you so much. Which moves us on to public participation. So I'll call you to the microphone. You can then turn the microphone on with a button on the right, and you'll have 3 minutes. We'll take Tim Perry. Actually, I think I've spoken to you already. We'll do Matthew Brown first, then Tim Perry, and then Emma. We'll do you as a group because you're all talking about similar items, and then we'll discuss and debate as members. We may come back to you with questions perhaps, but I think you've got very similar items to talk about. So Matthew, if you could come first, please. Thank you.
Are we on? Greetings. My name is Matthew Brown. I've been a resident of Winchester since 2016. I'm father of 3 children in local schools, and I coach my daughter's youth team at Winchester City Flyers Football Club, the biggest football club, girls-only football club in Hampshire, made up of 400 football mad girls 16 and under, not to mention its 3 under-18s teams and 3 senior teams. Following the England Lionesses' inspiring victory last summer, girls football is booming across the country. Girls are flooding into the sport, and the Flyers regularly forming new teams to meet the demand, as our club policy is not to turn anyone away. In addition to the 400 girls playing football in town, when you add Winchester City and Littleton Youth Boys Clubs, there are approximately 1,500 children in the city playing football. However, the facilities have not kept up with the demand. During this past December and January, our team had all of their matches canceled, 6 in total, due to King George V playfields being either waterlogged or frozen. In the winter, Flyers teams' evening training sessions are held on the 1G artificial hockey pitches at either King's or the university. I've just dropped my daughter off there tonight, as these are the only floodlit spaces available. The hard surface of the hockey pitches are not conducive to football, but we make do with what we have. And the council seems to agree with this assessment. The Winchester City Youth Provision, published on the 1st of March, lays out what is on offer and accessible for children and young people in the district, and references the playing pitch strategy and action plan of 2018. This plan confirmed the poor provision for football in our city by stating there was a shortfall of 2 full-size 3G football pitches in the district, and forecast there would be a shortfall of 3 by 2031. In converting their home ground to 3G this summer, Winchester City Football Club will provide a much needed artificial surface for local clubs to use, but this pitch will primarily be for the senior club. As such, there will still be a shortfall that we need to address to provide for our city's youth. As such, there is currently funding available for construction of these state-of-the-art pitches, but the challenge, as I see it, is finding suitable land on which to do so in Winchester. The main requirements for the land are that it needs to be flat, suitable for floodlights, and a minimum of 2 acres required for a full-size pitch. So my question to the forum is, how can you help support the football-playing children of Winchester and capitalize on the available funding and the massive momentum we have with the sport by helping us find suitable land on which to build a 3G floodlit football pitch?
Very good. Thank you, Matthew. Tim, if you could step up next. Good. Good evening. My name is Tim Perry, and I've spoken to a few of the councils here already over recent weeks, following a campaign that I kicked off about a month ago to get a multi-use games area, or MUGA, built at one of the parks in North Winchester. A MUGA is an outdoor space designed for a variety of sports and activities, including basketball, football, and tennis, and more. MUGAs are hard surfaces, enclosures that promote informal ad hoc sports and games, rather than the all-weather Astro pitches that Matt was just talking about. We kicked off the campaign with a survey to assess the need for such a facility in the community, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, with 97% of the respondents welcoming a MUGA in their community. We started the campaign as we believe there's a lack of all-weather informal recreation facilities in North Winchester for children and young people. We chose a MUGA for our campaign for many positive reasons, and the evidence is clear. Children are more likely to engage in physical activity if they have access to a MUGA, and increasing physical health has a positive impact on mental health and overall well-being. There are 4,000 children and young people in the St Paul's and St Barnabas wards with no MUGA provision in this area, and this is a problem we need to address. A MUGA at a park in North Winchester, specifically St Matthew's Park, provides an all-weather sports facilities within walking distance for many of these children and young people. Furthermore, it addresses concerns about a lack of free-to-use informal sports facilities in the community. Most importantly, a MUGA will promote physical activity amongst our community's kids and is fully aligned to the council's community-led small-scale improvements vision for Winchester and the One Great Win exercise. The results from the survey are positive and fully support the aims of the campaign. As I said, 97% of the respondents confirm a MUGA will be a valuable addition to the community. 99% of the residents were from Winchester, with 2/3 from North Winchester. Over 90% of the respondents said they would use the MUGA frequently. As discussed with the councillors informally over recent telephone calls, I do intend to submit SIL application before the end of the March deadline to request funds to build the MUGA at St Matthew's Park. What would be helpful to understand are the following questions. How is the SIL allocated between town and district? If SIL is approved for this project, how is the project prioritised within the NERT team? And based on their current workload, what are the chances of this project being completed in 2023? Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Perry. And Emma back, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Emma Back from the Winchester Sport, Art and Leisure Trust, and I wanted to say a few words today in support of the community campaign for a new MUGA in North Winchester. Although, as you might expect me to say, I also support the quest for 3G pitches by Winchester City Flyers. As you know, Winchester Salt has been concerned for some time about the low number of MUGAs in the town area relative to the size of our population, particularly when we consider how many school-aged children and young adults live within the town wards. This was clearly illustrated by the 2021 census data presented at the Council's recent Health and Environment Policy Committee. It was also clear from that presentation that the wards of St Barnabas and St Paul lack play facilities for older children and youth. The community campaign for a new mugger to serve these wards is therefore really welcome, so many thanks to Tim for getting this going. This local drive for a new mugger in Week is precisely the kind of community-led initiative envisaged in the Winchester Town Vision, and it's one great win exercise which you're reviewing as part of your agenda today. It's also relevant to the 15-minute city concept explored in the Winchester Town Vision. National guidance on the provision of muggers suggests that these should be available within 700-metre walking distance from any dwelling. NEEPs, or neighbourhood equipped areas for play designed for older children, should be available within 1,000 metres. We're nowhere near meeting these standards in Winchester, and a new mugger installation alongside the existing play facilities at St Matthew's Field and complementing other equipment at Dean Lane Park would be a critical step in the right direction. Currently, a teenager living in Godwin Close at the top of Stockbridge Road near Tarestock Road, for example, would have to walk more than 2 miles to get to the mugger at Quanrail Road in Stanmore, a journey that would take approximately 3/4 of an hour. A walk of similar length and duration would be required for their friend living in Tegdown Meads. For both these young people, a mugger in Week could be accessed on foot within less than 20 minutes. Still a little further than indicated by national standards, but far more reasonable than the current situation. The national guidance also indicates that all new housing developments should contribute to the construction of muggers and NEEPs via Section 106 or the Community Infrastructure Levy. We've had lots of new housing built in the town wards in recent years, but no new muggers. Indeed, where new developments comprise more than 200 dwellings, they should ideally include a mugger. No new developments in the town have provided such a facility, and the Kings Barton estate, which is not in the town area and comprises 2,000 dwellings, has just 1 new mugger in its plans. It's clear we must use local SIL funds to fill the remaining gaps. In summary, the North Winchester Mugger campaign is a great demonstration of the Winchester Town Vision principle of people power. I hope the Town Forum and Winchester City Council more generally will back it with the SIL investment required to translate its youth-oriented vision into reality. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate that very much. I'd certainly appreciate all you three speaking today. I think it's completely appropriate, as a couple of you mentioned, the Winchester Vision, and that is one of the papers on the agenda today. We'll respond and discuss what you've commented on, but I would appreciate very much if you were able to stay for the whole meeting. I think it would be very useful for you to look at the other papers that we have coming forward. I think it's going to be very informative around the whole process actually works. But I'd like to throw it open to members for any comments or questions, observations, please. Councillor Lurney.
Thank you. And although quite a few members of Cabinet have responsibility for areas of the NERT team work, I do have principal responsibility for most of their work programme. I would like to thank Matthew, Tim and Emma for raising the issue of the facilities we need for young people in the Winchester area. I do think that 3G pitches is a district issue, so I think Councillor Todd might have something to say about those. As a North Winchester councillor, we have seen a considerable amount of development take place in the area. And while we have spent money on refurbishing and improving all of our play areas, we've not really seen the level of investment needed to deal with additional population. I do agree that a mugger behind Week School in St Matthew's Field in my ward would be a great addition to the facilities in our area, serving not only St Barnabas but parts of St Paul too. It's not just multi-use areas, multi-use games areas though. We also have requests to respond to the Make Space for Girls campaign, which I think it's important for us to address for additional cycling and running facilities, and as we've heard, in addition to the 3G sports pitches. At the same time, we also have an ongoing climate and nature crisis, which is leading to many of our residents to ask that we use our land to increase biodiversity and not lose any grass area to hard standing or hard landscaping. So we do have to balance up these competing desires, requirements that we have in terms of how we manage our very limited town area land. And we also need to acknowledge the considerable budget and resource constraints the town area is under, as well as the City Council. The Natural Environment and Recreation team have lost key members of staff in the past year. And even when these are replaced, we're not going to have the capacity to add new projects to existing work streams. I understand the desire to do something this year, but when you take into account the need for funding, planning, project management, as well as building, we're not looking at this year, I'm afraid. And we do need to think about how that fits in with all the other things that we'd like to do in the town. Unlike parish councils, residents may well not be aware that, like the City Council, we are actually covered by the government's capping regime, while many of the parish councils and town councils in our area are able to raise funds for any big project that they would like to fund going forward. We're not in that position. And every facility we add to what we own adds to our ongoing maintenance costs. We are looking at a deficit next year, and considerable savings do need to be made, including in our open space management budgets and spending on facilities. However, remembering that this is in the context of needing to reduce the work programme, I would like to propose that the consideration of any additional muggers, including one at St Matthew's Field, as well as the other requests for facilities we've received in the past year, be considered in the round as part of the review of the play area refurbishment programme and open space management, which is taking place this year. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lurney. Any other contributions to Councillor Todd?
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy with both of the points that have been made. I'm not a city councillor for St Matthew's Field, but I live very close to it, and I'm county councillor for the area. And I think having visited the rather nice mugger in Kingsworthy over the weekend, taken photographs and sent them round to all my colleagues, and I know the one in Stanmore well because it's in my division. Also then went to have a careful look at St Matthew's Field and concluded that it was a very suitable place for it and would be a good additional facility. So it's definitely something I would support, although as Councillor Lurney has highlighted, we face difficult financial times, and that is something that needs to be taken into account, particularly because although there is quite a lot of district sill around in terms of city sill, there isn't very much left that hasn't already been committed. So I think the right place for it to sit is within the review of the refurbishment programme, alongside, but being mindful of sources of funding that enable us to, perhaps take on more ambition that we might have assumed at the beginning, when we were setting the budget, where we can't necessarily plan on receiving community infrastructure levy. On the question of the 3G pitch, I was due to be making a decision a week ago, Monday, for the council to invest over £1 million with the support of the Football Foundation and in partnership with Winchester City Football Club. And I think the fact that that was the scale of money that we were talking about gives the sort of clear sense that this is almost certainly something that needs to be looked at on a district level, particularly since the figures you were quoting a shortfall on a district basis. But we are absolutely committed to increasing the number of pitches that we have and making sure that we continue that we support the very welcome and very encouraging increase in participation that we're seeing, particularly amongst women and girls in football and other sports. So again, within the constraints of a council that has to be careful in terms of its funding, And I think in this case, as a council that needs to understand the needs right across the district, it's absolutely something I'm very happy to take on. First of all, to make sure that we do actually get the Winchester City ground over the line, and then to see where we go next, because I certainly wouldn't see that as being the end of the journey.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other contributions? Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. I also absolutely support what all our speakers today were talking through. And I remember sitting in this room probably a year ago talking about muggers. And Councillor Looney, I'm delighted that we can include something in our programme of work. In terms of the 3G pitches, then Mr Brown referred to funding being available and looking for space on which to use that funding. So I think in addition, what you said, Councillor Todd, I think we should explore with Mr Brown where that funding is likely to come from and include that in our thoughts as well.
And I've spoken to colleagues who are aware that there are further sources of funding that may be able to support a 3G pitch rollout programme. Also, when looking at football pitch provision, we need to understand what the options are, for example, with the New Kings Barton development and other developments in the district, to make sure that we have the right capacity in the right place to support all the people who want to be playing football, men, women, boys and girls right across the district. So absolutely with you. I think we live in a world where the days where councils could look at their enormous capital budget and say which bit of it shall we divvy up and put behind this programme are no more. And it is very much that awareness of where can we seek outside sources of funding and partners to help us move things ahead. Which will be part of it. We're partnering with Winchester City Football Club in terms of their new pitch. I know there are other people that we can and have been speaking to on the subject of further 3G provision, and those kind of conversations will be critical to get the extra capacity that our district needs.
Yeah, thank you. In addition, the request made was to help find some flat land. Now, flat land in Winchester is at a premium, especially 2 acres of it. And I do think we should also take that on board as well and help with that search for the 2 acres of flat land, either in Kings Barton area or down near the new leisure centre area or wherever we can find flat land.
Very happy for that to be included. In reality, if there's flat land that doesn't have any kind of planning restriction on it, then we will not be able to afford it in order to build a new football pitch. This is something that very much will come through planning gain, but is something we need to be mindful of as we're looking for larger potential developments to ensure that we are mindful to make sure that we have these kind of pitches and other sports facilities available as we look at major new developments.
Thank you, members. Any other contributions? Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add my support for the presentations that we've had this evening. As a ward member for one of the wards in the north of Winchester, obviously very keen to support the use of facilities there, and recognising that we have as a council declared a climate emergency, and one of the critical things that are going to be sort of important in reducing the sort of carbon impact is to reduce the number of journeys and the length of journeys that people are taking. And the way to do that is by creating those 15-minute neighbourhoods, actually reducing the amount of time people have to travel. But those aren't going to just find, we're not just going to find those facilities or those areas need to be created. We have to actually make sure that they actually have the resources and the facilities that enable people to actually work and sort of have recreation in those 15-minute neighbourhoods. So support that, but also obviously increasing the ability and the opportunity for all of the youth to have facilities is a fantastic part of what Winchester has to offer. So thank you to all three of the participants. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, members. I think it just leaves me the opportunity to echo what was been said. I should probably declare an interest in terms of I am a ward councillor for the area containing St Matthew's Field, and I regularly take my kids over to the mugger at Kingsworthy, so I fully understand and appreciate the issue. So I'm pleased for this discussion, not for the reason I just talked through, but really because it very much for me does demonstrate what we imagined as part of the vision, which is really enabling residents. And I want to acknowledge the work that Tim, Matthew and Emma, you're doing to create these ideas and to bring light and detail to them. And I encourage you to continue reaching out to your councillors and working with your councillors as you are. You don't need that encouragement, but I offer it anyway. And really thank you for your time today. So what I took away was that certainly in terms of the mugger, we're looking at including that within the play area refurbishment programme and open spaces for next year. And the 3G pitch because of the cost and impact, really elevating that to the district level. So thank you, members, for those contributions there. But as I said before, you're welcome to stay throughout. I think you will find the rest of the agenda very interesting. And the agenda does go on to item number 6, which is St Giles Hill Park Management Plan. And that is Councillor Lernig. Is that something you'd like to introduce, please?
Yes, I've also got Rick Smith, the acting head of the NERT team, here with me to answer any questions. So I am speaking as Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency as opposed to a member of the Town Forum at this point, but I am really pleased to bring this update of the St Giles Hill Park Management Plan to the Town Forum this evening for consideration. St Giles Hill is of historic significance. It's been occupied from prehistory. The hill was the site of one of the great annual fairs in medieval times, which attracted merchants from across Europe to visit Winchester. Hopefully something that's still going on today, even if not in the context of St Giles Fair. COVID has demonstrated to many of us how important regularly being out in the fresh air and in contact with nature is to our mental and physical health. High quality open space is particularly important in our built up areas where many residents have little, if any, outdoor space of their own. It's an interesting historic parallel that the park was originally bought by the Winchester Urban Sanitary Authority for the health and well-being of Winchester residents. And today we're managing it for exactly that reason. We do want to make more of that history and the magnificent views offered across the city, while at the same time making it easier for our residents to regularly access the park and enjoy the outdoors. And we also want to potentially get them to get their hands dirty and actually have direct involvement with the park management. We want to improve the management of the area to maintain and increase carbon sequestration and increase biodiversity. And this plan sets out how we'll do that. It comprehensively sets out how we'll manage each subsection of the park to manage these sometimes competing, although I would say not conflicting, drivers to maximise the benefit we can achieve from this important open space. The town has committed extra funds for the additional tree management needed as a result of the climate crisis and increasing issues with diseases such as ash dieback. And it is incredibly helpful that Mike Biden and other volunteers have stepped forward to help us achieve what we all want for this area. As referred to earlier, the town area is incredibly financially constrained. The town account is projected to go into deficit and we do have to look at savings. So the aspirational aspects of this plan are aspirations right now, but we will be looking to see where additional funding and resource may be available to make those things happen. And this is a medium to long-term plan for how we'll manage the area. As mentioned earlier, I have Rick Smith, the acting head of the NERT team, here with me, and I don't know if he wants to add anything to my introduction.
No, I think that was a great summary. Thank you, Councillor Lenny. Yeah, just thanks to Councillor Radcliffe and other residents as well that have brought some information to us as well, and it's enabled us to sort of move forward with this. But yeah, any questions? Yeah, happy to answer.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Lerney. And Mike Biden, Councillor, you referenced Mike Biden. Are you happy to talk? Would you like to speak now, to contribute now, or perhaps after members have asked questions already? Very good. If you could take the chair, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my name is Mike Biden. I've been a resident on St Giles Hill for 36 years, I think, since 1986. I just wanted to say a few words and keep this short tonight. But members will have seen that in section 5 of the management plan, it refers to a role for volunteers, and that has already been referenced by Richard and Kelsey. In December 2020, Sue Croker, the then Natural Environment and Recreation Manager, wrote to John Cooper, the Chairman of St Giles Hill Residents Association. And this followed the suspension of the successful Green Flag working parties they had been organising due to residents' concerns over public liability issues. In her email, she stated the only way to overcome these was to set up a CIO, a charitable incorporated organisation, to organise any future voluntary working parties. However, the Residents Association cannot become a CIO as it is not a charitable organisation, and there the matter has rested due to COVID. Since Councillor Radcliffe initiated the preparation of a new management plan, he's encouraged interested residents to form a new charity to be known as Friends of St Giles Hill Park. I can report that this is now in hand. Whilst there is some way to go before it is registered and up and running, the necessary steps are being taken. And I am joined here this evening by Dr. Harry Mycock, a chartered horticulturalist, and Mike Thorpe, who is a committee member of the Residents Association and trustee of the ancient graveyard. Councillors Radcliffe and County Councillor Dominic Hiscock have agreed to join us as the founding trustees, and together we hope to be able to start Friends working parties sometime this summer. We would like to go on record as welcoming the new management plan. It's an important and essential step, and we hope that with the support of an active Friends group working in close collaboration with the WCC, it will be possible to give the park a brighter future. We recently began this process by meeting with Richard Smith and Coral Rogers, and we're looking forward to working with them. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Biden. So members, we're asked to endorse this plan. So I open this up for any questions, first of all. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see this plan come forward, and just wondered, I was quite sort of taken by how detailed this map of the park was. It's an area that I know, that I've walked in, I enjoy the views from, but I've never thought about its complexity before. And I noticed in the plan itself, you've compartmentalised it into many parts, and you've identified for each of those parts activity. Is this something unique to St Giles Hill, this area, or is it something we have for all of our parks?
I think, yeah, I think St Giles Hill is definitely quite unique. It's offers so much because it's right on our doorstep in the middle of the city. And we've got a range of habitats in there from a biodiversity point of view, which mean that you can get in the middle of the city, you can be in some really nice mature woodland. The next moment you're out in some species-rich grassland, which are things that you don't normally get in a city park. So the complexity of it means that we've broken into all those, I think it's 23 compartments or something like that, which does seem a bit over the top for a fairly small park. But the range of management is really varied. So we've had to do that so we can actually organise our management, organise contractors and specialists and so on. And as well as that range from community grassland to the habitats I've mentioned, we've always got new tree planting, memorial planting, and there's also the fact that you're on a very steep gradient. Much of the woodland is on a big slope. So that obviously offers great benefits from your views across the city and so on, and the viewpoint's a really important part of the park. But it does pose challenges for the management again, especially the tree management, which is, as you've probably seen in the report, is the main sort of driver at the moment with the ash dieback. A lot of tree work is needed, and safely getting those trees down is quite a challenge. So we're sort of having to stagger that over the next 5 years, obviously with safety being the first thing. But yeah, I think it is a complex site, and that's why we've had to sort of split it up quite a lot. I'd say most of our other sites aren't quite like that. They're normally either your amenity areas, or the other sort of wilder open spaces are generally a woodland or a grassland, that sort of thing. You don't have such complex mix.
Thank you, Rick, for that answer. I'm just wondering, I mean, is there any intention to make residents, the wider population, people that visit the park, aware of that, complexity of that diversity? And equally, as sort of a second question is, given the designation of all the different areas, obviously it's fabulous. We have a community group, coming forward who want to help with this and have configured themselves as a charity. How will we actually be working with them together on this? Thank you.
Yeah, I think absolutely the residents, so the Friends of Volunteer group is going to be key, and it's important to say we did previously have a really active volunteer group up to, as been mentioned, up to sort of COVID time, but because of liability issues, it ceased basically. But we want to work with them based on the management plan, on the actions that we've already set, and gone through the processes internally with officers and with yourselves to approve those, to then involve the group in those activities. So the intention is to have volunteer activity leaders that will come out and they'll lead those days on the basic sort of maintenance works and things like that. So we've got an idea already for some tree planting, which is replacement tree planting up there. And then some of the sort of smaller scale jobs on the woodland management, sort of removing epicormic growth off some of the trees and things like that, potentially moving some ivy off some of the trees, not all of the trees. It's again, that splits opinion on biodiversity versus amenity and so on, and safety. But yeah, we've already identified quite a number of tasks which the volunteers can safely and easily with our guidance work on. And I think, as mentioned by Mike, there's a lot of expertise in the volunteer group with the members that are already forming that group. So we're really keen to make that happen. And then I think the only other thing really would be, we would like to work with some other groups as well. So we've got links with the back group, the Hampshire back group and things like that. So making, as you say, making it known the importance of the woodland and so on. And then the importance of that for species like bats. We intend to put up some bat boxes and monitor those woodlands. We've done the odd bat walk and things like that with the community in the past. So it would be nice to be able to sort of get that sort of thing up and running again as well.
I think it's worth adding to that the St Giles Hill Graveyard volunteer group has been working incredibly successfully on the graveyard there, and I would recommend that town members take the opportunity to have a walk up the graveyard to see a lot of the work that's that's been done there, particularly because it's been done in a sustainable way, avoiding taking material away from the graveyard, but reusing what was there already. So I think we've got a really good model to work with from there, and I think it's really good that we've got members of that group involved here as well to take that expertise forward.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to begin by saying I really support this initiative. I think it's a much undervalued area of Winchester that has so much to offer. I think that whilst we can talk about it, though, as the St Giles Hill Park, it doesn't, its great strength is that it's not a single, easily comprehended space. Look at North Walls and you can see the whole place stretching out in front of you. This is very different. It's lots of little corners and bits of land, each with their own charms and opportunities. So I think what we've got here is a chance to do lots of different things within the umbrella of the park. So I can understand there will be people who'd like to recreate a bit of the original Victorian garden, and that will be a really interesting thing to do. There will be tourist views from the top, information panels and welcome and so on to visitors to Winchester. There are opportunities to link together the suburbs to the north and the south of the hill with hopefully accessible, or not accessible and energetic pathways around the hillside. The one that I particularly was struck by, I think it's in, my screen's gone dead, but I think it was 4.5 in the proposal, was to take advantage of the slopes to introduce some sort of adventure playground slides and so on for children. Maybe that's an idea that could be yet another call on funding for Councillor Lerny's playground refurbishment programme, or in this case, creation programme. It's going to be a long thing. Obviously, we haven't got all the money to do everything, but it's a really exciting project, and I want to do what I can to help it.
Very good. One question I have actually, Rick, and I think it's a fantastic paper, very detailed and informative. Speaks to, under tree management, essential tree works may have an impact on St Giles Hill, affecting views of the park. There will be a minor level disturbance to the park and to be communicated to all relevant stakeholders. Which stakeholders do you imagine, and how will we communicate with them?
Yeah, good question. And I think a lot of the work we've done already, a lot of the big work with the this winter on the main trees. Really, I think it was in the usual way, going out to local residents to tell them what we'll be doing, and then using our comms team as well to put out the messages on what we're doing. In some ways, it's safety issues as well. So when we did some work up there recently, a lot of the areas have to be temporarily shut off completely. So then that also does attract a bit of interest on what we're doing and why we're doing it. But yeah, that's the sort of thing I think we're working more and more with Jade and the comms team now on those sort of future works and events as well, and especially things where we can get more people involved rather than just sort of contractor works and so on. We'll be able to get those messages out to as much of the public and residents in the area as we can.
We still have questions just to check before. Yeah, very good, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I was struck speaking to quite a few residents around Baring Road and on Alresford Road as well, that they love how varied the park is. Councillor Edwards referred to it just before. So my question is around the biodiversity of it, because I don't think what we're proposing here is to perfectly manicure the whole kind of eastern side of the city. Could you just say, I mean, perhaps, I think there's a horticulturalist who's going to perhaps speak later, but maybe you could just say a few things about how the works you were talking about, removal of ivy and dead trees and things, would encourage biodiversity rather than sort of stripping it back to kind of big open green space.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question. To be honest, to be able to speak about those sort of things is great, because I formerly was principal ecologist, so that's my area that I come from. And absolutely, the driver at the moment is the ash dieback. It's what's bringing a lot of this work forward in the tree management. But we want to be able to, and one of my main drives is also being able to encourage biodiversity there. It's not Abbey Gardens, you know, we're not looking for that sort of park at all. So lots of examples of keeping a lot of the material in the park, so biodiversity piles. So when you cut up some of the logs, they're piled up and then they provide habitat for invertebrates and so on. That's really key, is not dragging anything out and tidying it up like a garden. That's really not one of our aims. And they are actually in there as a sort of overriding aim that we'd aim to do as well. It is a balance on a site like this, because obviously we can't, we don't want to just fell trees and just leave them, because there'll be safety issues, it will restrict access and so on. And we have to sort of find that balance between the contractors clearing their work and so on, but also promoting that wildlife. So we wouldn't be, in some areas, once you've done some tree work, you chip some of the trees and just throw all the chippings back in there. But we want to sort of enable the ground flora to come out as well. So we're trying to look at the trees, but also the ground flora and so on. And then I mentioned things like the bat and bird boxes and things like that, which we want to actually get a bit of a better idea of the wildlife that is using the site. So we've got some baseline, but we want to be able to develop that as much as we can. We already do some surveys of some of the grasslands, the species-rich grasslands, which we encourage. So we cut those areas in a different way than we normally would. It's not just the mower comes on and just leaves the grass cuttings. We're trying to remove the grass cuttings much in the same way as the road verge projects, which is another biodiversity project which you may have heard of, but all trying to increase biodiversity on the site. But we also are aware that other users want shorter grass, amenity grass for kicking the ball around, dog walking, all sorts of things. So we sort of used areas where we're not going to lose those to find that balance again.
Westwood.
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the viewpoints? So I love walking up hills. You go to the Lake District a lot, and the intention is to get to the top and have a look. When Councillor Radcliffe introduced this to us some 6 to 9 months ago, he talked about the fact that many years ago it used to be a fairly open environment there, grasslands, and the trees have naturally seeded, grown, and the viewpoints have closed in quite a lot at the top. Is it the intention to open the viewpoints a little bit and provide some prettier and nicer viewpoints and seating and benches and so on at the top there?
Yeah, thank you. I think absolutely the viewpoints sort of mentioned at the start that they are one of the sort of, again, the important things that's cited in a lot of the St Giles Hill documents that I've looked at when I began the management on the site. And they're really important historic views as well. So if you've been up there recently, so some of the tree work has actually sort of specifically opened up the views to St Catherine's Hill, and you're sort of framing that now. The fact is a lot of the planting has now become mature, and I think the idea would be to frame those views. We're never going to be sort of cutting down trees unless there's a sound arboricultural reason. It so happens that the ash dieback means we can actually get some wins with some tree reduction there. So we're clearing some trees and actually opening up views at the same time. But yeah, I think it definitely is one of the drivers are the viewpoints, and we're also aware about the sort of the litter issues and things like that, and trying to manage some of the slopes again, it's got those risks with it, but trying to make that more manageable, that it doesn't become just a trap for litter and so on.
Councillor Thompson?
It's more of a comment, actually. Are we into comments now? Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to say I'm delighted to see this paper here before us today and the management plan that's attached. And I'm really, really pleased that we've got the volunteer group reset up and re-engaged, because I think when we talked about this before, we all felt a sort of deep sense of disappointment that the volunteers didn't feel that they were able to continue. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think it is a huge asset, St Giles Hill, for the city, and one that has really been a bit neglected. And yet, your view from the top of the High Street is behind Alfred, St Giles Hill, and I think it's fantastic that we've got plans in place to manage the land now. And of course, it isn't an easy piece of land to manage because of the steep slopes, and certainly walking up it and some of the paths and the steps in particular can be actually quite treacherous, I feel. But I'm really pleased to see that the viewpoints are going to be looked at. And in fact, in warmer weather, when we were able to go out onto the balcony here, in fact, one of the viewpoints is now, you can see it from here, which several years back you wouldn't have been able to do. So I do welcome that. I do think it's, as I say, a great asset for the city, and one that needs to be looked after and cherished. And so I'm very pleased that we've got a plan to do that. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other comments, debate? Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm very pleased to offer my enthusiastic support for this new management plan for St Giles Hill Park. As Councillor Lerney, as Rick, Mike, other speakers tonight have all pointed out, the park at St Giles really is an exceptional public space, much loved by residents, but also increasingly popular with tourists and other visitors. And I think it's a real jewel in Winchester's crown. You know, I might be biased, but I think outside of London and the big cities, I can't think of any town in Britain that has a park with a view to rival the one from St Giles. You may remember that in January last year, I brought a paper to the Town Forum calling attention to the poor state of parts of the park. And members agreed then that what the park needed was long-term investment and a new 5-year plan to make that happen. And the plan before us is the product of a year of work, really, by our colleagues in the Council's Natural Environment and Recreation team, including a tree survey, bat and bird scoping, biodiversity audits, and so on. And I'm enormously grateful to the whole team, especially to Rick, as well as Coral Rogers and Ivan Girdler, a tree specialist, and also to the many residents in St Giles, in Highcliffe, in Winnell, who became involved and who contributed ideas about how the park might be improved. Now, sadly, I know that our current resource constraints mean that some of the more expensive ideas for park improvements have had to be set aside for now, although they are included in the plan as aspirations to be considered if and when resources permit. But importantly, the plan does include a core set of commitments and investments that will, over time, arrest and I think start to reverse the decline of this park. But as important as the plan itself is for the park's future, just as important, if not more important, is re-establishing this group of volunteers able to work with the council on future maintenance of the park, and also ready to mobilise further funding for improvements in the future. And we owe an enormous debt of thanks to Mike Biden, who spoke earlier, and to Harry Mycock, who is with us tonight, who, along with a number of other residents, are spearheading the new Friends of St Giles Hill Park group. I think the next item on our agenda is an update on the vision for Winchester. And when we adopted that vision a couple of years ago, there There was a lot of talk then about facilitating volunteerism, encouraging, supporting groups of residents that are keen to pitch in and improve their communities. And I think the creation of this Friends of St Giles Hill Park group is a great example of this approach in action. And I look forward personally to working with Mike and Harry, as well as Jeff Wright and Anna Stewart and other trustees and volunteers to support their work going forward. With their help, with public backing, and with the council's commitment that we've had tonight, I'm confident that we will safeguard the future of this very special and very Winchester place. Thank you.
Anything else, Radcliffe? Anybody wish to add to that? Councillor Tobacco.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Radcliffe summarised it all very well, but I just wanted to add my congratulations to all involved in this paper, and Councillor Radcliffe in particular, for putting this very firmly on the agenda. And what we have here is something that I think he can be very, very proud of as a big achievement of his time as a councillor. It is indeed a very good paper. In fact, I think it is the embodiment of the Winchester vision. It's a big win, full of the paper itself, and it's full of small win ideas, which is great. I really like the fact that the tree management, nature management steps have been sort of identified as achievable and deliverable in current budgets in the paper, and the aspirational projects all seem very sensible, but indeed bold, and will bring what is a hidden gem of the city out to many other people, I think. And indeed, it's extremely satisfying to see the Friends of St Giles Hill created. Is it FOG? I think is the, I don't know, is it the variation? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe work on that one. Work on that one. But it's clearly a team of highly skilled folks who really care deeply about the space, which is absolutely crucial. And it means that the aspirational projects are far more likely to come to fruition over the years, because it means there's a group of people who can apply for grant funding and support from the council, that can fundraise and that can gain people's support. So it's really fantastic to see. So congratulations again to all involved in the paper, and Friends of St Giles Hill. I won't use the abbreviation again yet.
Very good, thank you. Any other contributions? Very good. Well, I'll just simply add my acknowledgement to Councillor Radcliffe for his work. He acknowledged a number of important parties and contributors, but certainly I'd like to add my acknowledgement to Councillor Radcliffe for his work on this. And I think particularly, as has been mentioned already, the work in supporting the volunteer group. I mean, that is essential to this work, to this management plan. And I want to thank the volunteers in advance for the work that is involved in the coming years. And I know you're going to do a fantastic job. And it does, as been said, play into the next agenda item, which is very much the vision for Winchester. Because of the frustration, I think, that was mentioned before, just how we couldn't get volunteers with the liability issue to do what was needed to be done. And we were about the vision, which was about empowering people and being an empowering council. And to see this evolve over the last year, I think it's a demonstration of resident initiative, resident-led initiatives, which are then supported by the council, which is a template for how we can move forward, things forward in the future. So I think with that, what we're asked to do is to endorse this. I'm expecting full endorsement. Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
It's not an order, it's an expectation.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item. I think I get to introduce this one, being the Winchester Town Vision. And Sue is going to speak to this as well. I get excited about this agenda item, but also somewhat with some trepidation, because I tend to get a bit emotional about this one in particular. So just a bit of a context for those who might be more recent. We launched the vision in March 2020, in March 2020, a week before COVID lockdown. We wondered what we were doing, launching a vision exercise at that time, and the consultants we were working with had never done anything in such a virtual fashion as were required at that time. But I think in hindsight, it worked out incredibly well. It was originally designed more as a pragmatic design-led concept, as a wrapper for the local plan and as a wrapper for subsequent design codes, to create a vision for what Winchester could be in the future. It didn't quite work out like that. It was a difficult time, obviously, because of COVID, but it was also a time when people were frustrated with the council as a whole. And the reaction very much to the exercise was, don't ask me what. You keep asking me what Winchester should be like. Tell me how. I never see anything changing. Tell me how Winchester is going to deliver. How can we as residents get involved? So it was very much a surprise that we weren't getting the practical, what should Winchester be? It was very much turned into, how should Winchester be? How should people be involved? And I do think it very much came from COVID times in terms of, you remember a lot of support for vulnerable people in the communities, a lot of community engagement. We would all come out at Thursday at 8 o'clock and clap for carers. It was a long time ago now. People appreciated the social and health benefits of walking and cycling. There were far few cars on the road. And that context needs to be borne in mind when we look at the vision, because that's very much a lot of what has come out of the vision. Certainly, there were things which led into the planning process around Winchester to be 15-minute cities and a city driven by walking, which has come through in the local plan. And you can see a lot of the local plan is informed by the vision itself. But as I say, it was very much what was surprising from the exercise was it was very profound. It was profound in the way that people were expressing themselves and how they want to shape and contribute to the city of Winchester, rather than being simply, how do we design Winchester? So it was this intended as quite a practical exercise, but it turned into something quite profound, which is important, therefore, that we have this exercise every year, every March, where we review our progress against that vision. And it was set out to be a 10-year vision to 2030, where we review what we were doing, the successes that we've achieved, and also look at where we need to make improvements, where we can listen better, listen more, and respond. And that's why I so much appreciate resident contributions today, because we always need to be listening more and contributing more and empowering more. And if we don't have that, then we're not listening enough, we're not supporting enough. I think it is going to take to 2030 when we look at the vision itself, because there is so much to do, but also the economic situation isn't helping either. So a lot of what we want to do is going to be limited by that to some degree, to the economic situation. But that aside, as I say, it's important that we review each March how we're doing against that vision. And with that, I haven't stolen all your thunder, Sue. I will ask you to introduce the paper.
Thank you very much. And no, it hasn't. I was going to cover a slightly different aspect and to say that this report, as you mentioned, is a review of the past year, and it follows the same sort of structure in providing some of the activities that have taken place against the 5 vision themes. But I have no doubt that this does not cover everything that's been achieved. It is what we know has happened, and but I'm sure across the teams there's many other activities that haven't been included here, and we need to perhaps find a way of making sure we have a better way of connecting all of those different activities. But I did want to just highlight some of the themes and activities, and touching on that idea about how we bring people together in the city and bring communities together. There have been a number of events. A new cultural network activity has started, which has brought together providers and local residents to talk creatively. We've had the Enchanted Light Garden, which has brought families into the city to experience Abbey Gardens in a new way. And we have again supported Green Week, and there's many community activities and engagements in that programme. Also, we supported critically the people's experience of living here, and particularly those new to the city, through our Ukraine refugee response, but also through the cost of living and supporting how people are coping within our city. And we've been looking at tackling antisocial behaviour, working with a number of agencies and support partners and organisations, and particularly the work of our neighbourhood services team, who are out talking with people directly about these issues. And listening and consulting continues through local plan work, through our central Winchester regeneration and the archaeology sessions, bar in depot, station approach, walkabouts. So some of these are new approaches to how we consult and engage people on some of our major projects and future developments. And we are still continuing to grant organisations who are supporting a range of different people within our community and our city centre on a number and a range of issues. And also projects funding for King George IV grounds improvements. So as I say, a snapshot, a flavour of some of the activities. I'm sure it does not capture all that's been going on. But in conclusion, I did want to start to say that we are needing to create a log of this activity. We reported last year, there's a summary here. We've talked about 100 great wins, and I felt it was important to try and start to capture some of this past information and this year's information into at least a very simple log of some of the things that have been happening and something we can build on. And also I wanted to make the town forum aware that we are continuing to develop the Step 2 guide, how to bring forward facilities, how to bring new services into local areas by residents themselves. We have an example of this where we provided a guide to how people put on street events and all the different places you need to go and how you navigate through systems and council permissions, etc. So we want to take that thinking further and provide a resource and as an information place for people that want to bring forward facilities or local services in their areas. And that work is already underway. So I think that's a very brief summary of the paper and concludes my remarks. Thank you, Councillor.
Very good, thank you, Sue. Any questions at all? Councillor Rich.
Thank you. I'm going to try a bit further back. That's better. That's less echoey. It's probably a bit too detailed, so it's not really fair to put you on the spot. But 100 great win number 26 is Milland Road improvements. Having just walked down Milland Road on my way here, I'm just curious if there's an update on that particular one, because I know residents are really keen to see some progress, but it's a bit stalled for now.
You're correct, I don't have that level of detail with me tonight, but I'm very happy to go away and get that information for you by way of an update.
Councillor Batho.
Thank you very much, Sue, and just to give my support and sort of encouragement to the work that's been done over the last year and obviously from 2020. I just have a question in terms of how we've approached the vision so far. Just wondered, is there any way or anything that we could be doing differently as a town forum help you to implement and to encourage the vision to be taken up by the residents of Winchester.
Thank you. I think the difficulty for me when I'm collating this is actually to try and get a feel for the breadth of activity that is taking place in local communities. This is very much, again, a view of the council's activities, but it's how do we actually capture in what might be happening in local areas between groups and organisations themselves, and the activity and some of the things that were cited in the vision, and the work that was about audits and how do we bring people together and how are people coming together to use spaces that might be available. So I think for me that's one of the challenges, actually having the insight and understanding of what's happening at that very local level, and we don't have enough resources to really be out there and understanding that firsthand. So some of that feedback back from councillors as to what's happening in their local areas, I think would be extremely useful and very informative.
I think you're right, Councillor Bath. I think one of the principles of the vision was to do more audits and to look at where there are gaps. And I think we've looked at, with the grant programme in particular, where we can target grant funding if we knew where there were gaps in service provision and where there were areas where grants have worked well, how those grants can be extended across the broader town. So I think there's very much a big overlap with that grants work, but it's the power of auditing, and I think the audit work that came out of HEP in terms of the open space provision is another example where we can get our hands around what we're actually dealing with and where there are gaps. And if you know where the gaps are, then we can address those gaps. So thank you for raising that point. It's something we do need to pay attention to, for sure. So, and with no questions, let's move to debate. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. I know this has been a labour of love for you over a number of years, and being one of the few people involved in the vision from the very beginning, it's so great to see it continuing to have the impact. The fear that we always had was that this was going to be presented to us, it would go on a shelf and never be used, and that I think we've been very dedicated and committed to making sure that wasn't the case. I think the effect of the vision has also, even, it's brilliant work listing all of the activities that have come out, and we've heard tonight from other community groups wanting to bring projects forward. And I think what the vision has done for us is it's challenged us and our way of thinking, that suddenly we don't have to deliver all of these things. We're far more open to hearing about these ideas and thinking, well, how are we going to work with you? How do we develop and how do we deliver projects that we don't necessarily deliver, but we work with the community to deliver? The grants are a fantastic way of doing that. We had another panel last week where we heard from more groups, more different groups applying for funding, doing things in the community. I don't think they've been awarded yet, so I can't be too specific about what they were, but there was one in particular which is delivering an activity that traditionally the council would have delivered, and instead it's hopefully going to be a community group delivering that activity. Sorry, that sounds very cryptic, but it's an example of the change in the way that we as a town forum, and I think we as a council operate as well. Broader district projects, Central Winchester regeneration. We heard from the vision, nothing ever happens in Winchester, nothing ever changes, everything gets challenged, nothing moves forward, and yet we had the decision last week to appoint a developer. We are moving forward. So the vision very, very much still key to our work as a town forum, our work as a council. So thank you for continuing to remind us of it, and we'll see you again next year, I suspect.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you, Susan, for bringing this report. I'm delighted to see all of the different projects that have been linked to the vision and the work that's been done under the various headings. I still have the vision documents. They sit on my desk at home and I look at them regularly. I can't say that for a lot of council documents, but for some reason these ones have stuck. And I think, as Councillor Becker said, the impact of the vision isn't just in perhaps the way we work or in the enablement piece. I think it's very much that it has become more central to the way we approach things at the council. That point about we refer back to the vision, we refer back to that enablement, we refer back to wanting to not always look for the sort of the big scheme, but the smaller schemes that can really make a difference. And when I look at the grant funding in times of more financial constraint often come under pressure. And we can see when we look at the list of those small grants that have been awarded either at district or at town level, we can see how a small amount of money can actually go a very long way to enable a community group or a group of people to get on and do a lot of work. We spoke earlier about St Giles Graveyard. I know that they've had a small grant which helped them do some of their work and facilitated a lot more of an outcome. I'm very pleased to see this come forward again for the continued progress. Always we'd want to do more if it was possible. And in some ways, coming out of COVID, which Councillor Crass referred to, it's kind of taken a while almost for community groups to be able to warm up again, to come together, to sort of come up with ideas. And I think pushing forward, we need to keep that emphasis and keep encouraging that involvement, because it isn't just for the town to lead. The town can facilitate, the town and forum and the council can facilitate, but together with community groups, we can do so much more. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tippecooper.
Endorse St Bartholomew's full house here, Councillor Ferguson. Just to endorse those comments from my fellow councillors there and say that, and Sue, not saying you've undersold yourself here, but I think there's so much within these wins. I mean, you could take the Ukrainian refugee response, as you know, I'm very involved in, and number 28, and you could probably spin off about sort of 30 or 40 small wins from that single item on this appendix. So it's supposed to emphasise that although these are 54 wins listed here, there are probably many more that can be unpacked from within them. And going even further than that, the actual impact of the work that goes on in each of these line items probably extends even further. It's a really, really great piece of work, and it challenges us all to continue doing more and more and connecting different organisations to the support the council can give. So really brilliant work. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Councillor Tippecooper. So I'm just checking what we are obliged to do with this report, just to shall I cross off T's. Asked to note my comment, which we're doing. Very good. Just leaves me the opportunity, I think, just to summarise and restate what's been said. I think certainly if you look at the original vision work, Winchester and this council are in a very different place than we were 3 years ago in terms of getting stuff done, which is what a lot of the issues coming through from the complaint and from the feedback from residents were. Very different place than we were 3 years ago, which excites me in terms of where we're going to be in 2030 if we continue to be an empowering council. I think the grant programme is a fantastic demonstration of that, particularly with the economic situation we've got, where we can support with the grants, and the grants programme has been fantastically well managed this year. I will talk about the grants more specifically, But I think those two pieces struck me that, Sue, there's an incredible amount of work that's been done. Not just your work, it does cover the whole council as well in terms of a new approach to engaging and supporting residents. So with that, I think we've noted and commented appropriately. I think we get to move on then to probably, as I say, what the vision was more imagined doing from a practical perspective, which is around design and the local plan as a precursor to the local plan. And I'm delighted to move on to item number 8, which is local design codes, and a presentation by Andy von Bradsky. Are you diving straight in this, Andy, or Adrian, you providing some context?
Very good afternoon, evening, rather. I think you've all received a copy of the presentation, so rather than going through it line by line, I think I'll give you a quick overview, if that's okay. Does that work? Hopefully you can see that on your screen above you. So this is about design coding, and as everybody will know, design coding becoming much more important as a tool for the planning system. So the issue is, how might this work for Winchester City Council generally, but also how does this apply to Winchester Town? I've been asked to give an overview of what part of Winchester might actually serve best as a test for how design coding might be developed. Every local authority across the country will have a different approach to this. I think Winchester has got some specific issues in terms of the complexity of urban form settlements and issues around the district generally. So how might we go about this? I mean, in the first instance, you have the High Quality Places SPD, which I applaud is a good document, probably needs update, well, does need updating to accord with more current issues. The reason I raise it now is because the study that we're going to be discussing needs to inform how that document gets updated and improved. The issue around where you code is quite relevant, because you can't code everything. You need to code areas where you understand change will occur. And that's an important criteria, I think, for where you might code in the future. I've set out on this particular slide different contexts. So a local authority wide would rely on the High Quality Places document. Larger development sites, you can actually create your own development briefs, your own area action plans for that. And if you get the general aspects of coding right in the High Quality Places document, you can avoid having to update everything that you've currently got in the way of design statements. In terms of testing the issues for design coding, Winchester Town itself has got lots of areas of change. Initially, the understanding was to focus on where you have allocated sites, and you have some significant ones, of course. I think identifying the key issues for Winchester by testing an area and then looking at how that might roll out and be applied and replicated in other areas is an important starting point. So always in my mind when we did this study was, how can this inform your approach to coding in a wider context? So I was asked to look at 5 areas of Winchester Town: North Winchester, Eastern Lane, Romsey Road, Stanmore, and Oliver's Battery and Bushfield. So my study is in a sort of a descending order of priority. So I'll focus a bit more on the North Winchester, which is, I think you will have appreciated, the preferred approach to doing a study. I won't go through the character. You all know the character of the area. I mean, it's got lots of the sort of issues that I think are typical of Winchester, typical of Winchester district. It's edge of settlement. It's got main roads running through it. It's got two centres, you might say, two local centres. It's got a rolling topography. It's got some heritage assets, but not a huge number, but sufficient. But the important aspect of nearby development on Sir John Moore Barrack, the Barton development, is important in terms of the relationship, which I'll come back to. The opportunities there are quite significant. You probably could describe it as being one of your first 15-minute neighbourhoods, which I think makes it an interesting area of study. It has infill sites, which again could be coded, specific issues around coding for what you do on infill sites. It's got community groups that you can engage with. It's, as I say, adjacent to other development that's happening. How do you make the connection from one part of the city on the edge to the centre in terms of movement, green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, and how does that all tie together? So it's a very interesting area. One aspect to it, which might be, you might describe as a constraint, is just how big it is. And without specifically identified funding to invest in an area of change, and large areas of owner occupation, which make change a bit more difficult. Romsey Road, it was next on my list of preference in the sense that change has already happened. You've got a huge amount of quality interventions in Romsey Road area. And of course, you've got the prison and the hospital, two really important assets for not just Winchester town, but the wider area as well. Very busy traffic corridor, rich in heritage assets, and very typical of, you might say, Winchester past and present with the work to the university. The issues there is that it is an allocated site. The constraint, you might say, is about how that development might come forward in the future, and the certainty of change coming forward, and what you then want it to become, which is clearly a bit of an unknown at the moment, but it's got all the ingredients otherwise of being a typical part of Winchester with typical issues to address in terms of movement, nature, the type of development, and the mix of uses. Euston Lane is again another allocated site, as you know. It's the main road into Winchester from the north, very busy with heavy traffic, and a very important component in Winchester for employment and retail uses. Again, edge of settlement, so how you move from one part of the county into Winchester becomes quite an interesting aspect. The issue there is, although it's allocated, it is for employment use. It has potential for change, but difficult again to know how that change will occur, where the change will occur, and difficult to know how that will manifest itself into the future. It's got all sorts of positive aspects in terms of regeneration opportunity adjacent to and including some residential. There is, though, the difficulty of, which is the same as Romsey Road, in fact, of not having a defined community with whom you engage, which is an important component of design coding, of course. It has, very heavy vehicular use, so how you actually manage some of those bigger constraints, I think, makes it less of a likely candidate to test the code. Oliver's Battery and Bushfield Camp is the other area, really impressive viewpoints out onto the countryside, a wonderful part of undiscovered, in my view, Winchester, with a great context, lots of history to it, the army camp and the ancient monument at Oliver's Battery make it quite an interesting and typical place. It's got lots of large areas of opportunity to densify or increase the amount of developments on the site, but clearly constrained by all sorts of issues. Very much owner occupation, established housing, which would make change a bit difficult. It has an allocated site, Bushfield Camp, which is obviously going through a different process at the moment through an outline consent rather than through a design code, which rather defeats the benefit of it being an allocated site for design coding purposes. Lots of issues that can be improved in terms of community, retail, movement, again, active travel, how you move from the edge of settlement into the centre, how you open up routes, movement more generally through the area. It does, though, once you take Bushfield Camp out of the equation, there aren't many large-scale development opportunities within Oliver's Battery. And finally, Stanmore, which is an area of consistent two-storey development, very impressive sort of green infrastructure, which obviously could be improved, but all the basics are there. It's bounded by high-value areas. It's, again, edge of settlement, good views and connections to the countryside. The benefit in Stanmore is that most of that, or a large amount of the land, is actually owned by Winchester itself. So you could say that you don't need to code because you can do what you need to do anyway without having to code for it. It is quite difficult to see how big change will happen within Stanmore. Has a limited amount of funding available for it, and the complexity of right to buys and owner occupation and the mix of tenures makes change a bit more tricky. I don't expect you to read this, but hopefully you've understood that I did a bit of a scoring matrix on each of those 5 areas. What best addresses the issues for Winchester? What are the opportunities for change? What are the community and stakeholder involvement, i.e. how can you engage with the community best in these areas? Is the context, does it have heritage? Are there issues that are typical of Winchester? And how replicable is it in terms of issues elsewhere in the district? So in terms of the scoring, I mean, it's pretty tight, but North Winchester did seem to be ticking more boxes than the other 4 places. So I won't go through the testing issues in North Winchester in detail, but again, I go back to this point about it being edge of settlement, it tying together with other initiatives that border it, how you make improvements to open space and public realm, how you make the connections back into the centre much more strongly, particularly in terms of active travel and green infrastructure that connects into the centre. And how do you manage infill sites? Very typical sort of area where infill sites are prevalent, and how some of all of those issues, in fact, feed into what you might improve the high quality places. Coming back to that point, that it is representative of many of the key points. Those key points, I think it was interesting hearing presentations from others this evening, very much around nature, reinforcing green, blue infrastructure, how you strengthen landscape, open spaces in urban areas, how do you reduce car dependence, improve cycling and walking, lots of issues around public space and the quality of those public spaces, and not least, of course, climate change. So all of those issues can be sort of pulled out from the testing of code for North Winchester and fed into the wider area. I won't go into the design parameters and the coding approach, but there are some really important aspects to coding which require some careful consideration about what a code for North Winchester might look like. And finally, just a point about the quality of architecture. I was really impressed as I went around just the quality of what is being built and has been built. But it's a question of the code allowing for more consistency, greater consistency of that quality coming through. But you're starting from a really good place, and I'd urge you not to constrain or use the code to constrain any kind of architectural language, because you've got such a rich mix of quality buildings being delivered in your town. So that's all I have to say, and happy to take any questions.
Very good, thanks, Andy. So a little bit of context to this is at the last meeting we took a presentation from Adrian looking at design codes and the opportunity that we have to do one in Winchester. We agreed that subject to agreement on the location, we would authorise a contribution of £3,000 from the vision delivery work to continue in collaboration with the council and the City of Winchester Trust. So this is very much about seeking agreement and gaining agreement on what location is the place to start. We were looking for Andy to come with his experience from effectively being the author of the new design codes, or one of the author team from central government. So we're very lucky to have him be part of this and help us understand where might be the best place to start that work. So any questions, members, on Andy's work, if you would. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry if I'm being a bit dim here, but I just wonder, you mentioned that in Stanmore, looking at that area, we wouldn't need to design code it because we own all the land anyway and we could do pretty much whatever needs to be done. So I just wonder whether you could, in a few sentences, just explain how having a design code actually helps an area change.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a good challenge back. I'm sure there are lots of challenges that could be thrown my way about how this election has gone. In terms of Stanmore, I think the issue is there are issues to deal with, and a design code could easily deal with those particular issues. And I'm thinking of the strengthening the sort of the natural environment within it, addressing some of the issues to do with community provision, the community centre, and having a sort of trying to improve the connectivity again to the city centre. So there are clearly issues that the area would benefit from having a code for. So maybe my comment about because you own the land you don't need a code is probably a poor representation of the reason not to do it. I think it scored less highly because I found it quite difficult to envisage large change happening in it, rather than because you own the land. So hopefully that answers the question.
It was really not so much saying why aren't we doing it for Stanmore, but really just understanding how a design code would help an area such as North Winchester or even Romsey Road.
So the issue about design coding is about the spaces between buildings. So it's not about what the buildings look like, although that comes into play. It's much more to do with the quality of your roads, your streets, your public spaces, and how you ensure that you get the quality coming through consistently in an area by setting out requirements. So in terms of North Winchester, I can see lots of potential for how you might improve the public spaces between buildings, for example, how you might improve the green infrastructure, how you might improve parking arrangements. There are all sorts of issues there which were more diverse, I suppose, than I perceive there to be in Stanmore.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and just even a slide pulling out the different elements for each of those 5 areas. I've got three questions. When you were doing the scoring, I just wondered whether each of these elements would have the same weighting, particularly if we're looking at coding potential, impact of coding, whether you might consider those would have a more significant weighting or whether they're all equally weighted. That's an easy one. Perhaps this is one for Mr. Fox. If we did have a design code for North Winchester or for any one of these areas, how would that interact with local plan policies? And equally, if we were successful in having a design code for a certain area, how enforceable is it? What teeth would it have?
You want to answer the teeth one?
Yeah, there's a double act between myself and Andy, so I'll pick up question 2 and 3 if that's okay. Still got quite a lot of I'll try and sit back a bit. So in terms of how it will interact with the local plan, I think the first thing to say is that it builds on the back of the Reg 18 local plan in terms of giving a bit more detail. If we were obviously to progress it now, it would be against the existing local plan. And I assume that what we'd want to do is obviously adopt it as a supplementary planning document, similar to what we do with village design statements. So I see it as a kind of next step in terms of obviously bringing our vision from the Reg 18 local plan into kind of fruition. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that I see the village design statements eventually segueing into local design codes. So it's that kind of learning experience that Andy was talking about in terms of how we can do that. In terms of how enforceability it is, I think that comes down to be obviously giving it weight through the planning system to become an SPD. And then also my colleagues in development management can obviously give it that teeth, that weight that we need. It is bringing places together where we know we've got King's Barn, we know we've got change happening there, we know we've got change happening with St John Moore Barracks. And it's how those connections and those places can obviously relate to each other and talk to each other in a positive way, I guess, not only from a connective point of view, so that we're not just building isolated places that don't actually link together.
So what I was saying is often, you know, you've set out a list of criteria and you've obviously scored against the criteria, but sometimes certain criteria you might want to give different weighting to. So I just wondered if these were weighted scores, particularly if I look at things like coding potential and impact of code, benefits of coding. I just wondered if in your mind they're equal to opportunity for change. You know, I just wanted to understand.
I understand. Thank you very much for repeating that. I think there are some issues in that list of assessment criteria that are more important than others. I haven't weighted them, but I'll pick out 1 or 2. The issue around community engagement is essential for a code to work. So you will see there's a heavier weighting for areas that have a more identified community. Having a vision, and therefore, you know, what is the opportunity for change? You know, vision is all important in terms of this, and again, the community play a role in defining what that vision is. So that becomes a really important aspect. And of course, does it address the key issues that are prevalent across the whole of Winchester town and the wider area? So that first point becomes a particularly important point. So if I were to do the weighting, you suggested it would probably come to the same conclusion.
Mr. Westwood.
Thank you. Just a question on the community and stakeholder engagement, which is important. If I look at North Winchester, you've got the Greenfield site at Stonewall Barracks with no community. You've got Barton Farm, which is a quarter developed and 3/4 no community. How do you score in that respect when there is no community and compare it to the other areas where there is existing community?
So I think our coding proposal doesn't include incursion into Sir John Moore Barracks or the Barton development. So we're not seeing the code as being something that would inform that development, although making connections with it is the most important thing. And the connections probably best expressed by the people living in North Winchester about how they might want to see the connections made into these other developments. So we wouldn't expect engagement beyond the boundary of North Winchester itself.
Mr. Fox.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything?
I'm just going to say that I think, first of all, the people in Kings Mountain would definitely say they are a community. They're a very strong community in their own right. But they're not there, that's right. But the point that this particular area of search includes Hairstock. Hairstock is part of Littleton and Hairstock Parish Council. And they will rightly be involved in this. They have to be involved in this. So it will not be a purely town forum area where the others are, but it is important that they are part of this conversation because it's an area that they manage money for and that the local parish precept for. And it will have to be part of the discussion. And also probably tying back with Councillor Westwood's comment, you'd want to have some interaction with Headbourne-Worthy Parish Council as well. Now, Littleton and Hairstock actually have a village design statement out at the moment, which very, very, very close to confirming. So for Littleton, but not for Hairstock. So this, in fact, is a tie-up. In fact, would be a useful tie-up, but I think it's something to think about in the overall plan, the way in which this is approached.
Thank you. Councillor Batho.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to reflect that North Winchester is not just about the developments around it, Kings Barton and St John Moore Barracks. It is actually about the communities that already exist there. Strong communities in Week, Hairstock, Takedown. Each of those have their own identity. But as I said at the meeting prior to this, which I expressed the fact that there is the opportunity because of the commercial, the actual sort of shopping area in Week and to some extent in Hairstock as well, to look at the 15-minute neighbourhood, which I think is critical to this design code. It's the only thing that really from the climate crisis that we actually have that we could actually extend for this design code. So I think one of the things for me that's actually missing from this in terms of the criteria for selection is actually the opportunity to create a 15-minute neighbourhood. And I think the North Winchester area actually has that significantly. Also, I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, and you just highlighted again, the fact of the adjacency with a village design statement through Littleton, because that actually is also relevant to Stanmore, with its relationship to Badger Farm and the parish area there. Oliver's Battery and the relationship with Bushfield also is then parished in Oliver's Battery, and also Compton will be involved with Bushfield Camp. So I think the fact that we're actually taking, and the suggestion is to take an area of Winchester that has that co-location of a existing, or will be by the time we actually come around to doing the assessment work, village design statement, which we then have to work with, and obviously the developing communities of Barton Farm and of, well, not probably that by the time we do this, the work of St John Moore Barracks, but certainly we can anticipate that that actually can come into it. And I think also, again, parochially, having something like that and working with Littleton Parish Council over potentially St John Moore Barracks could actually help with that sort of relationship as well. So I just would strongly support, again, sort of given my location in terms of ward councillor, but would support the selection of the North Winchester area for this particular design code. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Batho. I'm not sure there was a question there. It's more a response to the statement made, I suggest. But thank you. Councillor Lenny.
Thank you. You mentioned, Andy, that connections were one of the most important thing about the design code. how does the design code fit in with other existing strategies, for example, the local walking and cycle infrastructure plan and the movement strategy?
I think anything that is currently agreed and has been set out and agreed by planning authority or by the council, by councillors, is a constraint on what then needs to happen. There might be ways, for example, that things could be improved as opposed to changed, i.e. you could define what you mean by a green route in specific terms. So you could actually set out what you think the best green route should be. You can create new criteria that might reinforce your current proposals. Say you take urban greening factors, for example, which you might not have, you might have. But again, if you have a sort of an approach to natural environment which you set out in your local plan, design code can reinforce and add to and make sure that those policies get delivered.
Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's perhaps a clarification or a revelation of my misunderstanding. But I supported North Winchester as a good place for when we were sort of brainstorming what we might go for, precisely because in Sir John Moore Barrack, we have a potential base where what we learn from the surrounding community could be applied. And so the permeability would happen in the existing communities and then extend sort of naturally, osmosis or something, into the new development. Am I correct in thinking that what you were saying was that there would be problems why that couldn't happen, and you wanted to constrain the area for this study to the existing settlements?
I think a bit of misunderstanding there. I think I was talking about community engagement, and as opposed to the urban design issues. So the benefit of having development to the north and to the east of North Winchester is that you can look at how you make those connections. And those connections become quite important in terms of an overall strategy, which then links into how your movement strategy works into your town centre. And it's the same with green infrastructure. You don't just look at within North Winchester itself, you look at how those green infrastructure connections might be made beyond it. So in fact, it could start helping inform what Sir John Moore Barrack site might become. It lends itself to supporting strategies that they then develop.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that I had misunderstood, because that's much more encouraging. Could you say a little then about how far we would have had to have advanced with the local design code process? How established in law, I suppose, it would need to have been in order to be a tool that could be used to guide or set parameters around a new development, and how long that process might realistically.
Thank you. I think it all comes down to the area, because the indicative area that we're showing on the plan, for example, excludes the St John Moore Barracks, because they are doing a master planning process, and they may well be doing a local design code themselves to kind of come to that granular level. I think what we're trying to do is obviously show the connections into the site. So we know, for example, that St John Moore Barracks people will be traversing Harestock Road to access the services and facilities. It's how best can we make that happen in a positive way with the local design code that we are suggesting we do. Clearly, obviously, as Andy said, and Councillor Porter said, the parish council need to be at the table. There's other stakeholders. I think we just need to work out who those stakeholders are and what they can bring to the table. So, for example, the DOI are a stakeholder because obviously they obviously own a large site opposite Harestock Road. So I think that's the key challenge we've got, is basically working out who are the stakeholders, what can they bring to the table, and then working it up from there. But like I say, we're just, at the moment, we've got an indicative area. Whether or not that needs to flex, you know, I think will be tested through the process.
Could I add something just to that? That Andy actually is the person that wrote the original principle of design codes for. So he might like to explain where they sit in the ultimate planning process and what power they have.
So the government's aspiration for design codes under the current bill going through is that design codes become part of a local plan, i.e. they have teeth, they are an adopted tool, and they have the same weight, potentially, as a local plan. So a visual document which sets out your design aspiration, your vision for an area, becomes a supplement to your local plan. So it has real teeth. But of course, that means it has to go through the process to get there. It has to go through an SPD process, it has to be examined, the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, it will, in the future, if current government policy direction continues, become an equivalent to your local plan.
Thank you for those questions. Do we have any debate on this subject? Councillor Lally.
Thank you. Like my fellow ward councillors, I would support North Winchester being part of being the area that we look at first for this, partly because of some of the complexity, because if we start somewhere too simple, it actually won't teach us the lessons that we need to learn about, for example, working with different parish councils, having multiple authorities working in the same area. And because of the new development that's going on, you know, a master plan being developed right next to where we're developing the design code. Again, I think that's a good thing in terms of when we seek to roll these things out, having learned a lot of the lessons we've needed, rather than doing it in one area which is too easy and then we try and roll it out in multiple places and it all falls apart because we don't really know what we're doing at that point. So I think this is a good start. I think it'll be an incredibly useful piece of work, and I'm fully behind it.
Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for the presentation and for crystallising what it is we're trying to do. I know we've talked about this several times, but today I feel like I more fully understand what it is we're trying to achieve. I would obviously like it to be in my ward. I would like it to be Eastern Lane, that part of the city, but I can see that you've gone through, there's been a clear evaluation process gone through, and I can see why we have come to North Winchester. For the issues around the complexities, the different bodies involved, I certainly hope that it won't just be Winchester and the Harestock Parish Council will be involved, but also the Worthies one, Headbourne Worthy as well, Parish Council's apologies to Headbourne Worthy for not getting that correct. I hope they'll be involved too. I am very interested to see whether we do get that in community involvement in this process. I think the community in North Winchester will certainly welcome it. I hope it will go wider than just the parish councils. I hope it will actually be the sort of the heart of the community that comes forward. And very much Councillor Bathurst spoke about not only the new developments, but the existing communities that are there and that have seen a lot of change in North Winchester, particularly with the infill development, which has changed the character and raised concerns. So I have quite a lot of expectations of the process, and I'm keen to see the outcome. But I am happy to support us going forward with this, particularly if it is the first step to allow us to do more elsewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Any other comments at all? Any other debate? Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. I mean, I do support the decision, and you know, I wouldn't say my knowledge of design standards is more than like that much. But the thing that would still concern me is that we do it in one area of the city that is very, very different to a lot of the rest of the city. So how applicable would the work that we do in North Winchester be when applying it to a centre of what was a medieval city, Roman city, and then trying to apply it back into the other areas? And I'd like to hope that the work we do is replicable and usable back into the more traditional areas of the city which have different problems.
Do you mind if I respond to that? I think it's a very important point that you make. And we debated whether heritage assets, i.e. the sort of Romsey Road versus North Winchester issue was the right outcome. But I think the feeling is that you have an awful lot of experts, a lot of constraints on development, a huge amount of knowledge around heritage in the city, that actually it's probably pretty well covered by other tools and other mechanisms, and that actually the issues relate to the more general points about infrastructure, the more general points about the quality of spaces, the movement, all the things that I summarised, and that heritage becomes something that you continue to sort of monitor in a very special way with special tools and special requirements in your local plan.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I also support this proposal. I think it's really helpful. I think it raises a lot of questions that are really important, because the truth is we don't give the area outside the centre very much attention at all in planning policy terms, and by default, you know, we spend a huge amount of time spending lots of money working out how to do central regeneration or station approach. We do lots of work to understand Winchesterness and develop SPDs, and that's great. I'm so pleased we've done that. But I don't think we've always got it right in terms of how we've done infill and how we've extended our city. And I think this is a really important piece of work that will help us do both of those. It will help us work out how existing settlement or existing parts of the city will evolve in order to knit new parts of the city seamlessly in there, so that it just all feels like Winchester, but while still having the local character and difference that is also part of what Winchester is. You know, Hyde is not the same as Full Flood is not the same as Week is not the same as Stanmore, and that's fine, because, you know, one end of the high street isn't the same as the next bit of the high street or the other end of the high street. We have a lot of, one of the characters of the city is that there is a lot of difference and variation within it. We're not Bath, we're almost the anti-Bath in terms of how our architecture works, and that's something to be proud of. But let's make sure it's all great. Let's make sure it's all really good, and that when we're looking to see how we do infill, how we connect new parts of our city together, that we become an absolute model for how we do that, while keeping what's special, and dare I say, even creating new ways to be special as a place, but not just the centre. The whole city should be special.
There's no other contributions. I'm not quite sure how to top that actually in terms of The whole of Winchester should be special. It's special.
Oh, Winchester is special, but we need to make sure it stays special. And we make it even more special if that is possible. Although, as Councillor Radcliffe has shown with St Giles's Hill, it is possible to take places that are extremely special already and find ways to make them even more special. I'd love us to keep doing that.
Very good. Councillor Porter, please.
I'm just going to say that, and I endorse everything that's just been said, but the reason we want to do this is because it is something that we feel that could add to our suburban centre design for the whole of Winchester District long term. This, as you know, was something that you felt really strongly about, and we wanted to find a way of giving ourselves the knowledge to do this and replicate this, not just in this part of Winchester, but other parts of Winchester and other parts of the whole district. And we're very honoured to have Andy Arbrowski to come and work with us, to be our critical friend. And I think it's an amazing opportunity and something we should grab with both hands.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think it is an amazing opportunity for the reasons you've talked through, to be a leader in this space and to innovate is going to be, there's going to be challenges along the way, and we need to figure that out as we go. I think having Andy alongside, and importantly, I think having the City of Winchester Trust and the experts that we have in Winchester. I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again in terms of if we can't do it here, where could you do it? And it is an opportunity to lead in this emerging space around design codes. And I think we've got all the components. To my mind, for the reason stated, North Winchester is the place to do that. And I think it's all come together very nicely. We don't have a paper specifically calling this out, but we do need to reach agreement as a town forum on a location. And the proposal is North Winchester. And I'm looking for I'm looking for support for that. So I suggest, are we agreed that North Winchester is the spot where we start our design code? Great. Thank you, members. Greatly appreciate that. There is much work to be done. We need to explore those steps. I know one of the first steps being worked through is the formation of a design code board. And there are terms of reference being worked through at the moment. So that would very much be the next step, is creating a board with terms of reference. So you can expect that to come back to a future town forum, I would expect. But for now, thank you, members, for your continued support with this, and particularly Andy for coming in today and the work you've done in advance of this, and obviously Adrian and the team and the City of Winchester Trust. Absolutely, that's something that it is, as I've mentioned before, it's a three-way solution between the council, the City of Winchester Trust, and the town forum, and that unit, I think, is going to be a fantastic way forward. So thank you for all the contributions made to this discussion. So with that, we move to the next and final item of the agenda, which is the opportunity to look at informal groups. Any volunteers for the informal group updates, please? Councillor Tippecanoe, please.
Cool. Thank you very much, Chair. Quite brief from me, just to say in terms of the project work happening at Hyde Gateway and the Buttercross, just to update on the sort of target dates for the commencement of those works. This summer 2023, and there's some reasoning behind that. There will be some works happening on an arch over Nunn Stream, which is a heritage assets some people have raised a concern about. There is a repair works lined up for that archway, but it will have to wait until after the trout spawning season, I believe, on the river. So there's always some sort of reason. That's all from my group, I believe. So I'll pass.
So I'm not seeing any more. So with that, we've got one more thing, which is the work programme. To note the work programme for, I don't think that's right.
It's supposed to at the end of the municipal year.
Because I'm at the end of the municipal year, so there is no work programme. So I think the one thing I would like to add to next year's programme is a review of the vision next March. There is actually one thing that this is why this is on here. So we identified an issue with the grant programme in that we don't typically kick it off until we form the grant group, the informal grant group, in the June town forum meeting, and then that then doesn't report back until September. So we don't kick off the grant programme until September. So we lose half the year in the grant programme. We did some really innovative exercises to push the grants out in that 6 months this year, but the proposal is that the existing grants team take on the work to work with officers and the town forum in the interim period between the new municipal year and June, such that when we come together as a town forum next June, we're in a place to launch that grant programme from June rather than having to wait again till September. So I'd like to ask the existing grants team to continue their work if they would be so kind. That would be Councillor Becker and Councillor Bather. You can continue that work through the year, and then we can accelerate that programme by 3 months. Very good. Thank you very much. We're with Councillor Lerny, please.
Thank you. I think it would be appropriate as a last item on the agenda to actually thank the chairman for his work over the past year, and indeed his work on the council, particularly on the vision, because I think you have driven a lot of this forward and really helped us move forward in that planning sphere, which I know is why you actually became a councillor. And I think it does show that people can actually achieve some of the things that they want to do when they actually make the effort. So thank you very much, Chairman. And we look forward to working with you in the future in whatever form that takes.
Thank you. It truly has been an honour to work with you and to know you. And I have a far greater respect for the work that councillors do, and an understanding and respect for the work that councillors do. It is a very difficult job that you do.